My name is Maya Reyes, and I turned 27 last month the same week a pen scratched across a stack of papers and set my future in ink. The deal was for 3 years with the Portland Firebirds, a multi-million contract that would have sounded like fantasy to the girl I used to be, the one tying busted shoelaces behind St. Augustine's Church and shooting jumpers under a flickering streetlight. I remember staring at the figure $5.7 million plus incentives and feeling something like vertigo. Not fear, altitude. People who only knew the headline imagined I had always been aimed at this. I hadn't. I grew up on a quiet block in Providence, Rhode Island, in a small townhouse where the walls were thin and expectations were louder than applause. My father, Walter, believed in dependable things, steady jobs, pressed shirts, and practical daughters. My mother, Grace, curated our life like a mantelpiece display, dustless, polite, and fixed. Sabrina, my older sister by 5 years, was the exhibit at the center piano recital's juried show's orchid-colored ribbons taped above her desk. Luca, my younger brother, was the easy laughter that drifted down hallways and got him rescued from most trouble. I learned early to take up as little space as possible. Basketball arrived like weather. Not a revelation, just air moving in a way that made me want to keep moving with it. The first ball I owned had someone else's name half scraped off the leather soft and seemed like a palm. When I dribbled, our neighbor would bang the window frame with a broom handle, so I found other courts, the cracked asphalt at Green Hill Park, the rec center, with lights that never fully warmed the backboard behind the church, where the nets hung in thin gray threads. It's a hobby, Maya, my father would say, smoothing the newspaper. Hobbies are for after you have something solid. I tried to become solid the way they wanted. I stacked shelves at a dawn-opening bakery before school, powdered sugar turning my black hoodie pale. I tutored algebra for $10 an hour. I saved for a pair of shoes that didn't blister my heels, and for bus fare to a summer league where the rims were regulation height and a volunteer kept score. When it rained, I played anyway. The ball felt heavier with water, the court slick as a kitchen tile. There was a kind of education in that, adjusting your footwork, shaving the arc, trusting the release. That's where Coach Teresa Kim first saw me a Tuesday night in late October, the storm making Morse code on the rec center roof. She stood near the doors with her hood up, watching me run a 3-cone drill I'd set up with water bottles. When I finally stopped breath burning, she walked onto the court and towed one of my makeshift cones with a sneaker. "You always train alone, mostly. Lucky you," she said, not smiling. "No one to impress, fewer lies to believe. You've got balance and hips that stay quiet when you change direction. But your base widens when you're tired, and you let your eyes drift right before you pull up. Fix that." She didn't introduce herself until after she made me repeat a footwork sequence 15 times. Then she told me who she was, assistant at Harbor State with a reputation for turning raw effort into muscle memory, and that she'd be back Thursday if I was serious. I was there on Wednesday, and Thursday, and the Thursday after. With Coach Kim, work became an instrument instead of a punishment. She rebuilt my shot from the soles up ankles, stacked knees, soft elbow like a hinge. She made me dribble with my offhand while reading the number of fingers she flashed, then punished my wandering focus by switching it mid-crossover. Once, when the heat busted in January, she rolled out a space heater and told me to treat the sweat like it was July. "Discomfort is a lousy narrator," she said, tossing me a towel. "Don't let it tell you what the story is." Junior year brought letters, then calls, then a slow parade of faces who knew my stats better than my teachers did. My parents looked relieved for a reason I couldn't name. Scholarships sounded like money they wouldn't have to spend, not risks I'd be allowed to take. I chose Hudson State, a division of program far enough from Providence to breathe, but close enough that the highway sign still felt like home. Coach Kim drove me there in a borrowed minivan, the two of us quiet as the city gave way to river and trees. College felt like turning a corner, and discovering the hallway kept going. The weight room had a soundtrack of plates and metal. Practice at 7 a.m. required coffee. I learned to drink black. I studied sports management because it made sense to understand the business that would soon understand me. On the first cold week of October, I met Ethan Rao when my backpack zipper failed and a library's worth of notes avalanched across the floor of the law school library. He crouched to help and lined my papers up in quiet, perfect columns, You sort by topic or by panic, he asked. Whichever keeps me from flunking film study. Then topic, he said, and smiled like a sunrise you earn by waking up early. Ethan's life was the kind you could lean a ladder against parents who called just to say hello. A calendar filled with study groups and dinners that ended at a reasonable hour. He didn't understand my house, but he understood me. When I told him about Coach Kim's drills, he wanted to see the rec center that had trained my balance. When I blew off steam by shooting alone, he sat in the bleachers and underlined case law by the squeak of my sneakers. He talked about precedent the way I talked about film patterns disguised as choices. The game sped up. My sophomore spring, I broke a school record nobody kept track of until my name made it matter. By senior year, scouts began appearing at practices like Weather 2. They wore jackets that said other cities and watched without clapping. Coach Kim kept my attention on what I could control the conversation between my feet, and the floor, the angle of my shoulders, the way a defender's hips confess direction before the rest of their body does. We build good habits, she'd say. And good habits will keep you when adrenaline lies. I still think about the shot at the end of the regional final. We were down 1 with 5.4 seconds left, sideline out of bounds. The play wasn't for me. It broke once the first screen got jammed, then again, when the second option slipped on a wet spot near the elbow. The ball found my hands because there was nowhere else for it to go. I took one hard dribble to the left, stacked my feet, and saw the defender's weight sit just a fraction too heavy on her heels. The sound fell out of the gym. Release rotation, a line traced in air. When it dropped, the noise returned like a wave. Not destiny, just a decision paid off. After that, attention sharpened. Portland called more than once, and so did teams that loved the idea of me more than the film. I learned to listen for the difference. I didn't hire Ethan as a lawyer, he wasn't one yet, but I asked him to translate the language of contracts. We looped in Marla Devine, an agent Coach Kim trusted, because she said no as often as she said yes. The first offer from the Firebirds made me dizzy anyway. We let it sit a day. Then we sent it back with notes in 3 colors. Negotiation is its own sport. Terms moved, incentives sharpened, opt-out language stopped being a rumor. I lifted watched film, answered texts. I didn't know how to answer, and kept my voice steady when the conference call started. When it was done, we had numbers that felt like respect, not charity. Dean Holloway, the Firebirds president, met me in a corner office with a view that turned the river into a mirror. His handshake was firm. His questions were about work, not brand. Someone in the room took a photo of us that would end up in places I don't visit. "Welcome to Portland, Ms. Reyes," Holloway said. "We're building something that needs your kind of gravity." Coach Kim hugged me in the parking garage because she doesn't do spectacle. Ethan took a picture of my signed contract and turned it into a PDF like he was filing something sacred. I bought a cheap plant for the temporary apartment and watered it like it could root me. Strange how a signature changes the shape of a day. Success didn't make Providence vanish, it stirred it. In the quiet after the calls stopped and the celebratory dinner was paid for and my agent was on a red-eye, I opened a drawer and found a shoebox that had followed me across every lease ticket. Stubbs, a Polaroid of me, at 14 with a braid coming undone, the church backboard blurred behind me. I thought of Sabrina at the piano bench of Luca, laughing into his collar of my father's careful hands, smoothing out the morning paper. Not nostalgia inventory. I didn't call anyone first. I put my phone face down and sat with the echo long enough to be sure it wasn't just habit. Then I booked a flight to TF Green Airport and texted Coach Kim a simple home for a few days. She replied with a thumbs up I could hear. Ethan offered to drive me, but I wanted the airport alone. The murmur of departures, the feeling of moving and being moved. I packed one duffel, slid the signed copy of the contract into a folder between 2 hardbacks, and locked the apartment twice without meaning to. In the terminal, I watched a child run circles around a pillar, her father counting gently, her mother pretending not to count at all. The overhead speakers mispronounced a city. No one minded being mispronounced. I ordered tea I wouldn't finish, pulled my hoodie tight, and pictured the small blue townhouse where the paint on the windowsills chips in neat flakes. It was time to tell my family what my signature had made real. I zipped my bag and walked toward the gate. The plane dipped over the bay, and all that blue turned into grid streets, roof lines, the thin backs of billboards facing the highway. I landed at TF Green with a carry-on that had more paperwork than clothes, and took a rideshare past diners I'd ordered pancakes from at midnight in high school. Providence always looks smaller from a car with a stranger at the wheel. The driver asked if I was visiting family. I said yes, and tasted the word as if it had changed recipes without telling me. Our townhouse on Brookline Place still had the slanted mailbox and the patch of crabgrass we never conquered. The front steps were the same 2 shades of gray they'd been since I was 10, the paint line crooked where Walter had run out of tape. Lemon oil drifted out when I opened the door. A smell my mother trusted to announce order. The entryway mirror had a tiny crack like a vein. It had been there long enough to be part of the design. "Hi, Ma." I set the carry-on down and lifted a paper bag from a boutique near campus, the tissue whispering, "I came straight from the airport." Grace wiped her hands on a dish towel, though they were already clean. Her hair was the same perfect brown as the picture of her on the mantel from 20 years ago, the one where Sabrina holds an orchid ribbon, and I'm slightly out of frame. "You could have called," she said, which meant she wished I had. "Your room is... We keep some boxes in there now. It'll do." I forced a smile that worked fine for reporters and somehow not at all here. "Is Dad home?" "He's in the den, game shows." She said it like a condition, not a hobby. Walter appeared in the doorway with the remote in his hand, thumb hovering like he might need it to pause me. He looked at my bag, then at my face. "Maya." "Hi, Dad." We stood in that familiar shape around a silence neither of us knew how to redecorate. I lifted the bag a little. "I brought something." "Company?" Sabrina's voice cut down the hall before I saw her. She came in with the last of winter on her coat, and the museum lanyard she never took off even when she wasn't on shift. She kissed our mother on the cheek, touched Walter's shoulder, and then saw me. The pause she took was thinner than a breath and full of sharp edges. "Wow," she said, "the girl on the posters returns." "Hi, Sab." Luca arrived 2 steps later, cheeks pink from the wind, and a messenger bag bouncing against his hip. He hugged me, the way only little brothers can. Eyes bright questions lined up behind them. He looked at the bag. "You brought presents?" "Just small things." I set the bag on the coffee table and drew a circle with my finger in the air like I was sketching us into a calmer room. "Can we sit?" We took the living room seats. We always took Walter in his recliner. Grace on the end of the sofa nearest the lamp, Sabrina angled toward the window as if she might need to be rescued. Luca, on the carpet, long legs folded. The TV murmured an audience track in the other room before my father muted it, a last second of canned approval evaporating. "I signed," I said, and the word felt heavier than when I'd said it in glass conference rooms. "It's official." Walter's eyebrows lifted, not in congratulations, so much as in the way you acknowledge a weather change. Grace smoothed the skirt of her dress. Luca grinned. Sabrina crossed one ankle over the other and let her heel bounce once against the table leg, with "who Walter asked," as though team names were secondary to the fact that I had done a thing without his permission. "The Portland Firebirds." I kept my voice steady. 3 years. And the money, Grace asked, not unkindly, not motherly either. Just curious the way you're curious about the price of salmon at the grocery store. I said the number. Her mouth opened and then closed like someone had adjusted a dial just out of view. "That's significant," Walter said slowly. "For a game. It's a job," I said, "a contract." He was about to argue both those points on principle when Luca beat him to speaking. "She did it," he said, grinning at me. "You actually, Maya, that's huge." Sabrina's heel stopped bouncing. "Is it?" I reached into the bag and took out a box wrapped in matte paper the color of city fog. "These are just things," I said too quickly. I wanted, "You don't have to," Grace said, which meant she expected me to. "For you," I said to Walter, handing him the first box. Inside was a vintage Seiko I'd found at a shop off College Hill. He used to stop in front of the window when I was little and tell us how you could tell a man's character by whether his watch kept good time. He lifted it, turned it over, and read the engraving on the back. "For the hours you gave the rest of us." He didn't smile. He looked like the watch had arrived with an accusation. For Grace, I'd brought a silk scarf printed with a quiet pattern of ginkgo leaves in soft green. "It's from a designer who works with natural dyes," I said. She touched it like it might stain her fingers anyway. For Luca, a pair of noise-canceling headphones he texted me about last fall, and then talked himself out of because rent was a bill you should never test. He laughed out loud, honest and grateful. "And for you," I said to Sabrina, drawing out a flat case. Inside lay a gallery pass for a summer program in Portland attached to a voucher for studio time and a small grant I'd asked an arts nonprofit to connect to her name if she wanted it. I thought. She closed the case before I finished. When she opened it again, it was only to slide a finger under the pass as if to check whether it was real. Then she set it on the coffee table next to the watch box with a precise little click. "Must be nice," she said, looking not at the gifts but at me. "To fly in like the corporate sponsor at an alumni gala," Sabrina Grace said in the tone she saved for scolding other people's children. "No, let her." Walter placed the watch back in its box, the lid landing as softly as a door behind someone you're not sure you want to follow. "We should talk like adults." "I am talking like an adult," Sabrina said. She turned toward me fully now. Her voice wasn't loud, it was clean. You could have brought one thing, a book you liked, a jar of jam from whatever farm-to-table hotel you stayed at. But no, it's always big. It's always a show. "It's gratitude," I said, and heard how thin that sounded. It's me saying I see you. You see us because we are reflective surfaces at this angle. She tapped the case with a fingernail. "You think money is a language everyone speaks. You think appreciation is a language only you invented," Luca said, too quick. "Enough," Walter said sharply. Without looking at Luca, he looked at me. "Are you moving out there?" "I have to be there for camp," I said. "The season." Walter exhaled through his nose, the way men do when they've moved a couch without taking off the door. "And when it's over, do they keep you on retainer so you can buy us scarves?" "It's a contract," I repeated, feeling like a pen digging through carbon paper. "There are clauses. There's work." Grace folded the scarf again, as if it would crease incorrectly and ruin something. "People here," she began, then chose a different sentence. "Your aunt called last week and asked if we were proud. It would have been nice to have had something to say." "You could say you're proud," Luca said. Grace reached for the pass on the table and turned it so the logo faced down. "We're practical people, Maya. We can be proud when it's durable." "We survive plenty without durability," I said before I could swallow it. The room noticed, then pretended not to. Sabrina reached for the pass again and slid it back toward me. "I'm not going to the city that bought my sister," she said. "I have work." "You complain about work every day," Luca said. "You say the new curator thinks color fields are a personality." Sabrina didn't look at him. She looked at me. "Do you know how many times someone at the gallery has asked if I'm the Reyes," she used the article the way people use expensive soap, "unnecessary scented? And then they look disappointed when I'm the one who knows how to hang a piece so the light doesn't crush it." "That's not my fault," I said, then hated the words as soon as they left. "Sab, the pass was a bridge. If you don't want it, fine. Keep the grant in your back pocket. Or don't. I just wanted to open a door. And stand in the frame while we thank you," she said. "You call it opening. It feels like staging." Walter pushed his chair back a fraction, not enough to stand. "What else did you bring?" I laughed once because the alternative was something worse. "Nothing you can plug in or wear." The sentence I'd rehearsed in my head turned to a handful of loose notes. "The contract puts me in a place where I can help." I was thinking I glanced around the room that had taught me to use my inside voice. The house needs a new roof. The porch sags. I could Grace's hand went flat on the coffee table. "We don't need your roof." "It's not a roof," Sabrina said, smiling without joy. "It's a billboard." Walter's face shifted into the stubborn shape it took when a toaster wouldn't stay down. "We have dignity," he said. "We've managed." "You've managed me," I said so quietly that only Luca flinched. The air inside the room got crowded. The lemon oil felt like a layer you could peel off and still smell. I leaned back then forward and heard my knees pop like little lies. This wasn't the conversation I'd intended. It wasn't even a conversation. "I'm going to put my bag upstairs," I said, and picked up the carry-on to give my hands a job. "We can talk after dinner." "Dinner," Grace echoed, as if we were discussing a holiday she hadn't prepared for. The staircase rose along the wall, crowded with photographs, Sabrina at 12, with a cardigan tied across her shoulders. Luca clutching a soccer ball. The one of me where my braid is crooked, and the hem of my uniform shows my growth spurt like a scandal. I set my foot on the first step and heard Sabrina stand behind me. "You always do this," she said. Her voice followed me up 2 risers. "You drop a stone in the pond and then go upstairs while we deal with the circles." "Sab," I said without turning, "drop it. Afraid someone might think you didn't plan this scene." She climbed 1 step. Her breath was even. "Tickets on the table. A roof on Offer Your Name like a siren. It's a good composition." "It's a family visit," I said. "Stop directing it." I lifted my bag higher. The narrow hall at the top was still painted that soft yellow that photographs pretend is warm. I took another step. Sabrina took one too. I could feel her there, a weather system at my back. "You tell reporters you were the kid with the flickering streetlight." She said, "Did you mention who changed the bulb? Did you mention who drove you to the rec center when you couldn't feel your fingertips? Or is Coach Teresa in every paragraph because she makes you look like a narrative instead of a neighborhood?" I turned then halfway up, looking down at her over the banister. "You want credit? Fine. Take it. You kept score with the volunteer when he had to smoke. You taped my fingers when I jammed them on the rim because we couldn't afford a trainer. You told me to stop when I didn't know how. Are you happy?" She smiled again, smaller this time. "No. Because you say it like I'm misreading the label on a bottle you already drank." "Enough," Walter said from the couch, not moving. Grace whispered his name as if that would turn the volume on the room down. Lucas stood, then sat again, his hands doing their own argument. Sabrina took 2 steps close now, the kind of close that compresses air. "You don't get to walk into this house and make us an audience." I swallowed, "Then walk away." She didn't. Her hands lifted, palms flat and open, and for a second they hovered in that space where touch could be either a steadying or a shove. I saw her eyes, the color of our mother's hair in the photograph, and something there I recognized, even if I didn't want to, not just envy, but the fatigue that comes from carrying a shape that doesn't fit. "Don't," I said, because I could feel the floor changing weight under both of us. Her fingers closed on the strap of my bag first, then slid to my shoulders when the bag didn't give easily. The move wasn't athletic. It was domestic, the way you push a door that is stuck from humidity. My heels searched for a step that wasn't there. The carpet runner buckled like a wave. I caught the banister with my left hand and felt the soft bite of wood under my palm. There was no thought, just the narrow clarity the body has when it remembers gravity is not a metaphor. The edge of the next tread met the back of my calf. My balance broke the way a sentence breaks mid-clause. For an instant, everything stilled: the wall of photographs, the rim of the table downstairs, with the watch and the scarf, and the pass aligned like a still life, Luca's intake of breath, a thin seam in the air. I did not see Sabrina's face in that precise moment. I saw the polished spot on the banister where the stain had worn away from hands and time. Then the world tipped. My shoulder hit first a hot white. The corner of a step caught the side of my skull. Sound separated from itself and became 100 little bells. The carry-on tumbled papers to the wind, a page of the contract lifting like a gull, and then disappearing. I remember thinking nothing important, the way you don't think when a glass slips and you know you cannot catch it. There were thuds, not many enough. The living room rose to meet me, and I met it, the air gone out of itself. The lemon oil still smelled like a plan. The photographs on the wall rattled, and one tilted the wire, giving up. Walter's voice arrived as if it were coming from another room in someone else's house. Lucas said my name in a shape I hadn't heard since he was 8 and scraped his knee. Sabrina's breath came in short cuts, film spliced too many times. I tried to lift my head and learned a new definition of iron. The ceiling flickered where the light catches dust you can't see until it becomes a sky. I heard a glass set down carefully. I heard the television in the den unmute itself, and a laugh track float in and then disappear under someone's thumb. The carpet was rough against my cheek. The banister had a nick in it that felt familiar under my fingertips. I counted backward from 5, not to get anywhere, just to have numbers in the room. The second one stretched long and then got lost. Then everything was quiet in the loud way quiet gets when a room tries to hold more than it can. Sound came back before light, a metronome I didn't set ticking through speakers somewhere above my left ear. When I opened my eyes, the ceiling tiles were a quilt of white squares slightly out of true, and a plastic cup sweated on a tray within reach, but not within use. I tried to turn. Something at my neck said no. "Don't move just yet," a woman's voice said. Blue scrubs a NAM badge, Nurse Alina Sosa. She steadied the straw to my mouth with practiced hands, small sips. Water tasted like permission. When I could swallow without coughing, the rest of the room arranged itself: pale walls, a doorway with a swing arm, a monitor stitched to my pulse. How? The word rasped. How long? 3 days. Alina checked the drip and the readout. TF Green cops brought you in with EMS. You've been under observation in neuro. A second person entered, white coat, the kind face of someone who has learned to set honesty down gently. Dr. Meredith Hale, she said. You took a fall. CT showed a significant concussion, rib fractures on the left 3 and a hairline fracture in the right wrist. There's edema around your thoracic spine we're monitoring. You're in a brace for now. My brain climbed the stairs that my body had tried to go down. Play. The word felt like a coin I didn't want to spend. It's early, Dr. Hale said, and let the space after that hold the rest. She asked if I wanted her to call my family. Alina's eyes did a quick, careful thing that said there was more. They haven't been here, I asked. Alina's mouth pressed into a line. A group came the first night, she said quietly. They didn't ask to see you. They signed for your personal effects wallet phone keys. Policy lets us release those to listed family. I'm sorry. The ceiling sharpened. I pictured the lemon oil, the tilted frame, the stillness after the noise. I need to call Ethan, I said. And Coach Kim. Alina nodded. Made it happen. It didn't take long. Ethan arrived like a storm front that had already done its worst. Somewhere else, hair a mess. Law school hoodie under a coat, he hadn't buttoned the look of someone who'd been speaking into unanswered rings for days. He stopped hard at the foot of the bed, lungs learning a new pace. Maya. It's okay, I said, which wasn't true, but was the only thing he could put his hands on. He took my uninjured hand like it was still part of a game we knew how to play. Words stacked the house, the argument, the stares, the slant of Sabrina's face as she spoke to me like we were in a gallery and I was the piece being discussed. Ethan listened until the listening had nowhere left to go. Then he put his palms on the bed rail and rebuilt his voice from the bottom up. We freeze your accounts, he said, the legal mind snapping to a grid. We file a police report. We get your phone back. Do you remember your neighbor's doorbell camera? The one you joked was pointed at your adolescence? Mrs. Finnegan, I said. Her porch sees the entryway through the side light. A thread tugged at the edge of my memory. My bag. The strap. I hit the side button trying to hold on to it. My throat tightened. The voice recorder app opens with that press. I think it was recording. Alina, who had stepped back to the doorway to give us room, returned like a relay runner. I'm going to call security to put a hold on visitors, she said. I'd like to page social work and risk. If you consent, we'll flag the chart no contact until PD advises. I nodded. The motion sent a small constellation of pain up the side of my skull and across my shoulder. Alina adjusted the brace a fraction and the stars scattered. Coach Teresa Kim made the door frame look like a smaller version of itself when she walked in an hour later. She's not given to displays. The hand she put on my foot was as close to an embrace as a coach can get, without climbing over a tangle of lines she keeps for a reason. Hey, kid. Hey! Her eyes took in the brace, the IV, the way my left hand still wanted to curl like it was palming a ball. Her jaw set, then released. We worked the problem, she said simply. Piece by piece. Before we could rebuild anything, the floor shifted again. The hospital's finance office called the nurses' station to say my insurance information had pinged an error and the payment authorization for my admission had bounced. Ethan's phone chimed like a warning bell. He opened his banking app and the color drained from his face. Charges, he said. ATM withdrawals. The cards. He glanced at me, already carrying the rest of the sentence. They have them. He stepped into the hall with Alina and rearranged the world using words like fraud department and freeze and escalation. When he came back, he was all right angles and forward motion. Accounts frozen. Cards canceled. Bank investigator will call the PD. The police arrived first. Detective Jonah Velasquez had a notepad that looked like it had known rain and a tie you only wear when you meant to put on a different one, but left it on the back of a chair. He took my statement without cutting it into pieces, nodding when the gaps showed. He didn't ask about forgiveness or intent. He asked about contact sequence hands. Any witnesses who aren't family, he said. Luca Wine said, but I didn't finish. Mrs. Finnegan's porch cam, and maybe the voice memo on my phone. Velasquez scribbled something that was not a scribble. We'll seek a warrant for the house, he said, and an order for your medical records to document injuries. If your neighbor's willing to share, we'll pull the footage today. He was as good as his verb. By evening, he was back with a portable drive and a bag tagged with property seals. The porch cam footage was narrow and grainy and didn't care about art. Through the side light, it caught movement on the stairs, 2 figures in close registration, the brief bad shift of weight that turns balance into fall. There was no sound. The voice memo provided that. The file started mid-sentence with Sabrina's voice describing a composition and ended with the clatter of a carry-on and a chorus of smaller noises Brian Eno could have made into an album if he were cruel. Between those bookends were the words, I knew I had heard mine, hers. Walter's enough in a register I'd forgotten he owned. Grace. Don't call anyone yet. Then where are her keys? Velasquez didn't blink, and he didn't pretend to either. He asked me to listen only once. Ethan listened too, the muscle in his jaw working like a metronome that made no sound. Ms. Reyes Velasquez said when it ended, with your statement, this footage, and the audio, we have probable cause for assault and for financial crimes. We'll serve warrants tonight. The room held its shape around that. Coach Kim squeezed my ankle through the blanket. Alina set a glass of water down the way you set down a fragile thing. You need to stay whole. The hospital's legal office moved quickly after that. A no-contact order went into my chart. Security sat outside my door for the kind of reasons hospitals prefer not to list in brochures. When Grace and Walter and Sabrina tried to come up from the lobby the following afternoon, I didn't see them. I heard them. Voices travel differently in halls, words flatten volume carries. Walter. She's our daughter. Grace. There's been a mistake. Sabrina. She's confused for medication. Another voice cut through calm with that authority that isn't loud because it never has to be. Velasquez again. You've been served. Step away from the door. Paper moved. Shoes squeaked. The elevator took a long, slow breath and swallowed. Dr. Hale scheduled surgery for the following week to stabilize my spine and protect what needed protecting. I did not ask about the season. Alina showed me how to breathe into pain without giving it more air than it deserved. Physical therapy started in a small room where the parallel bars glowed with disinfectant and late sun. I stood for seconds at a time while a therapist named Noemi told me my hips were doing good work and my knees were pulling their weight. Ethan slept in a chair with his hoodie for a pillow and his phone face down, a habit he picked up when notifications started arriving from numbers he didn't recognize. Coach Kim went from the hospital to the campus and back her car. Accumulating coffee cups, her voice moving through calls I couldn't hear. She didn't narrate. She occupied. By the third day, the fraud investigator had tallied what my accounts had bled withdrawals at ATMs within walking distance of our house, attempts at transferring funds that had stalled when the bank's algorithm blinked awake. A failed try at my investment account, blocked by an extra layer of verification. Ethan had insisted I set up months ago when he was learning the difference between foresight and paranoia. Velasquez photographed the documentation and added it to a stack that had started as a notepad and had become a file. Arrest warrants are signed, he said, standing at the foot of the bed like a pastor at a bedside without the sermon. His pen clicked once. We'll bring them in for processing. Will Luca, I said and stopped. We'll talk to him, Velasquez said. He called 911 the night you were brought in. He looked at me for a beat. That call matters. The day had different edges after that. The nurses changed shifts. Noemi moved a cone 2 inches farther down the line. Alina taped a small card with my case number to the back of my legal folder so I wouldn't have to ask. Ethan opened his laptop and began a document with a title that was just my name and the date. Coach Kim told me in 4 words that the Firebirds' general manager had been briefed. Her tone told me nothing more would be discussed in a hospital room with a cop present. When night put a rectangle of darkness into the window, quiet settled in the heavy kind that's full of things you can't quite name. Alina came in with a new set of vitals and a question about pain. She adjusted something in the line, and the world got 1 degree softer. Try to rest, she said, and I almost laughed because rest had become a verb someone else wanted for me. Instead, I closed my eyes and saw the porch cam frame the side light. Like a narrow eye, the figures moving in a choreography that wasn't dance and wasn't an accident either. I saw the watch box, the scarf, the pass, a still life arranged for a painter with a mean streak. I heard Grace's, "Don't call anyone," yet loop once, then let it go the way you let a bad song exit a room without following it into the hall. In the morning, the bars would be there, and so would the breath that lifts and counts. Paperwork would stack and be signed. Doors would open and shut. For now, the machine next to my bed kept its stubborn time, and I kept mine. The morning of surgery started with a marker line on my back, and Dr. Hale's voice steady as a metronome. The OR smelled like ice and light. When I woke, time had lost a layer. Pain had edges I could name. Alina adjusted the bed and taught me how to breathe around a brace that felt like a temporary architecture. Nomi walked me to the parallel bars the way you walk someone across a narrow bridge, hands near not touching, ready if the wind had opinions. Detective Velasquez came with paperwork and sentences that changed shapes as they reached me, charged arraignment conditions. He didn't ask me to be brave. He asked me to read and initial. Ethan read every line and tapped where my grip was weak. Coach Kim stayed until the night nurse took vitals again and the hallway clock reset itself. The hearing fell a week later, 3 days after I learned to pivot, without leaning too much on the wrong side. I wanted to be there. Dr. Hale pressed her lips together and then nodded once. "If you go in a chair, and you leave early." Alina packed a small bag like we were going to a beach she didn't trust. Water gauze, a folded note with instructions no one had to read to remember. The courtroom smelled like varnish and old paper. The benches were filled with people who knew how to sit through other people's stories. When Walter and Grace and Sabrina were brought in, their clothes looked borrowed from better days. Walter's jaw locked so tight it made his temples pulse. Grace's hair was perfect. She twisted a tissue into a rope. Sabrina carried her height like it might drop her if she relaxed. The judge read out the charges, the clerk intoned them back. Velasquez's affidavit sat in a stack beside the prosecutor, who laid out the porch camera clip, the printouts of bank withdrawals, a transcript of the voice memo with lines that still rang in my ribs. "Don't call anyone yet." Where are her keys? Their lawyers tried to make the fall smaller, the theft a misunderstanding, the voices less than they were. The judge listened the way granite listens. Bail was denied. The gavel made a sound that wasn't loud until the quiet measured itself against it. When the deputy touched Sabrina's elbow to turn her toward the door, she looked up, not at me, not at Ethan or Kim, but at the back of the room, where a man in a navy suit stood with his hands folded. Dean Holloway. He hadn't announced himself. He'd just been there. Our eyes met. He didn't nod. He didn't need to. In the corridor, Ethan angled my chair toward the service elevator to avoid cameras. Someone asked Ms. Reyes, "Are you pressing charges?" The microphone smelled like a handrail. I said yes, because the word required no embroidery. The doors closed on the rest. Back at the hospital, a message waited. "Please call when you're able." D. Holloway, Dean answered on the first ring. His voice had the grain of someone who'd stood in cold air too long. "I'm not here to talk about timelines," he said. "I'm here to talk about support. We'll honor the spirit of your deal while you heal. And if you're open to it, I have a role that keeps you in the building without asking your spine to do more than it should." He described player development not as a consolation prize, but as a system with moving parts. I already knew. Footwork habits reads the patience it takes to stack good days. Full medical relocation covered a contract addendum Marla would finalize. "If at any point you want to step back," he added, "we make space." I didn't cry. I said yes, and felt something unknot that had been tightening since the lemon oil in the entryway. Recovery measured itself in unglamorous increments. Staples out. Brace adjusted. 2 steps, then 4. The first time I showered sitting down, I wanted the water louder so I wouldn't hear the sounds I made. Ethan learned hospital coffee geography. Noemi taught me to stand by, pressing through the big toes, not the heels. Nurse Alina brought me a hair tie from her own wrist when mine snapped. The press moved on the way press does. Paperwork did not. Velasquez returned with dates that meant court again. I met with the DA in a room that tried to be friendly with soft chairs. We reviewed what I'd say and what I didn't have to. Luca sent a text through Ethan that was just my name, and an apology with all the adjectives chewed off. I stared at it until letters turned into shapes. On the day I was discharged, Coach Kim waited at the curb with her car idling and a bag of ice and a towel. We drove past the rec center where she'd first called out my base for widening. The lights were on. The roof still hummed in October. "You'll like the facility in Portland," she said. "The baskets are true." We stopped at Mrs. Finnegan's on the way to the apartment. She stood on her porch in a cardigan the color of dishwater and hugged me carefully as if we'd practiced. "Had that camera since the rash of package thefts," she said. "Never thought it'd be for something worth keeping." I thanked her. She waved me off like it was nothing and handed me a bag of lemon squares wrapped in wax paper. Portland air was a different temperature of clean. The team's training center had glass that let in enormous sky. Dean introduced me to Reena Patel, the general manager, whose handshake was quick and whose questions were quicker. "We've got 2 rookies whose feet tell on them," she said. "We thought of you." I learned a new map office to film room, to court, to strength lab breaks bent around my therapy appointments. The whistle felt strange on my tongue the first time. I preferred clapping. I sat on a rolling stool and tapped a ball with my fingertips to show the rhythm I wanted on a stationary dribble. I paused film before a pick and asked a guard what she saw in the screener's hips. The answers got better. The pauses got shorter. At night, Ethan read case notes under a lamp set low and asked if the noise from the street bothered me. It didn't. Noise meant life had resumed. He learned how to cook one thing well and made it once a week like a ritual. Everything else we ordered. We laughed in quiet pieces at first, then in whole ones. 6 months in, he set a ring on the kitchen counter between the salt and a lemon and asked a question I didn't need him to finish. I said yes in the same voice I'd used with Dean Plain, because certainty doesn't require amplifiers. The case returned like weather does. The trial was shorter than I'd rehearsed and longer than most people thought it should be. The porch cam clip ran. The transcript got read. I took the stand. I said the fall felt like a sentence broken before it knew its verb. The defense tried to call it a scuffle. The jury looked at the photographs of my spine. Decisions landed Sabrina aggravated assault, Walter and Grace larceny fraud conspiracy. Restitution ordered time assigned. Words that once lived in newspapers now lived on paper with my name at the top. Later, a letter arrived from the women's facility upstate. Grace's handwriting. I read the first lines and folded it back into the envelope. In another season, I might open it. In this one, I put it in a drawer and closed the drawer. Luca asked for coffee. We met in a bakery that smelled like warm air and sugar. He talked too fast, then not at all, then just right. I froze, he said finally. And then I called. I nodded. He didn't ask for forgiveness as if it were a form with a signature line. We agreed on another coffee. In time, there were more. 18 months after the fall, I walked onto the Firebirds practice court without a brace. My gait had a new economy. My right shoulder said hello sometimes when it rained. A rookie named Jenna Lee waved me over with a question about space off the dribble. I took the ball and showed her the footwork drill Coach Kim had once made me repeat until the day had no hours left, then handed it back and watched her feet learn honesty. Between reps, I stood near the sideline and looked at the small things I could count on: the scuff at the free throw line that never stays clean, the hum of the HVAC, the low percussion of balls in the next gym over. Coach Kim leaned on the scorer's table and raised an eyebrow. Good work, keep going. Dean walked by with a clipboard and didn't interrupt. Ethan texted a photo of a crooked bookshelf he'd finally learned how to level. I blew the whistle once. The sound climbed and came down with the room. Jenna reset. The ball left her hand on time, the net answered, and the court kept our measure. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.